Rainn Wilson is an American actor, comedian, writer, director, producer, and businessman, best known for his role as Dwight Schrute on the sitcom The Office. Rainn has earned 3 consecutive Emmy Award nominations for his role in The Office, as well as international acclaim for his roles in 6 Feet Under, The Rocket, Super, Star Trek, and The Meg. Rainn is also founder of the website and YouTube channel SoulPancake, and is the co-founder of an NGO for the education of girls in Haiti. Rainn, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's very exciting to be hosting you.
I'm thrilled to be here. I wish I could be there in person, but this is the next best thing.
Thank you. I just wanted to start off by talking a bit about your early life. You moved around a lot when you were growing up, from various places, including Nicaragua, Washington, and Illinois. At what stage did you realize that you wanted to pursue a career in acting?
Oh, okay, great question. You're going way back, way to the very beginning. Well, here's a weird thing. I'm gonna tell you a strange story. And by the way, I have dogs in the background and guinea pigs because we're here on quarantine. So if you hear squeaks and barks, that's there's nothing nefarious going on. It's just animals aplenty.
Good to know.
So yeah, an interesting thing was when I grew up, my mom and dad divorced when I was about 2. And I stayed with my dad, and my mom took off, and I never really knew why. And I didn't really meet or get to know my mom until I was about 15. So my dad always supported me in doing the arts, and I did lots of arts. I did a lot of drawing and a lot of music and stuff like that. And then when I found acting, I got very, very interested in acting. My dad seemed weirdly concerned and kind of strangely less supportive about acting than the other stuff I was doing. So this is kind of a long story that I'm gonna shrink wrap for your audience, because I know they have notoriously short attention spans in Oxford. So basically, I started doing acting, and was there any specific reason that I liked acting or was drawn to it? Growing up, I watched a lot of sitcoms on television, and I just loved all of those goofy secondary characters on MASH and Bob Newhart and Cheers and all of the kind of great American sitcoms of the 70s and 80s. Some were not so great, but some were great. And I just kind of felt in my bones like, I want to do that, or I can do that. And I didn't talk to anybody about it, but just in my gut, I just had this thing of like, I want to be doing that thing. Anyways, flash forward to me at about age 19, getting to know my natural mother, birth mother. Her name was Shay. Her actual name was Patricia, but she changed it to Shay during the hippie days, because that's what people did back then. I was talking to her and I said, why did you leave my dad? What happened then? And she was like, you mean he never told you? And I was like, no, he never told me. And he just said that you guys had differences and went your separate ways. And she started to cry. And she was like, I was an actress in Seattle in the 60s doing experimental theater. And I left your dad because I was having an affair with a theater director. And this was this bombshell news that I got when I was, 19, 20 years old, I think 19 years old. And I had no idea. And yet it explained so much. So we wonder how much, is it nature versus nurture? To what extent is a genetic component involved in all of the decisions that we make? But obviously I was in some ways genetically predetermined to like acting and to want to do acting. And it also explained why my dad was strangely reticent about me going on the acting path, but he had been so supportive of music and art and other arts activities. So that kind of brought it all into perspective, and then it all suddenly made sense.
After that, you went on to study drama at the University of Washington before doing a master's at the very well-known Tisch School of Arts at New York University. Alongside this, you were also a member of one of the US's most distinguished theatre companies, the Acting Company. Could you tell us a bit about how these experiences trained you for the work you do today?
Yes, thank you for that. I think that the Brits would understand this maybe a little bit more than Americans, because this is such a tradition for English actors, is to go to drama school and do a shit ton of Shakespeare and classics, and then find your way going down other paths. And this is, it still happens in America. I still think in the United States, the majority of the really most interesting, best actors come from a theater training. But basically, when I started doing theater, I really wanted to go down that path. I remember going when I was 17 years old to my high school drama teacher. And I just started acting when I was 16, 17. And I said, Ms. Adams was her name. I said to Ms. Adams, I'm like, do you think that maybe one day I could be a professional actor? I was so nervous. I didn't know anyone that had been a professional artist. I mean, obviously my mom had when I was 2, but I didn't know anyone in suburban Seattle, Washington that got checks to do art, that would paint a painting and get paid for it, or do a play and get paid for it, or sing a song and get paid for it. It just was not my world. There were plumbers and fishermen and lumberjacks and Boeing airplane employees and whatnot. So this was a big stretch on my part. And I remember her response, and she was like, "Oh yes, you should. I think you've got lots of talent, but you must," she was very dramatic, "you must travel the world, and you must fall in love and read lots of books and have amazing experiences and learn as you go and grow and mature." And she was extremely supportive, and it really lit a fire in me. And I think that conversation was one of the most important conversations I really ever had in my life. And it lasted 2 minutes. But just think, if she had been jaded or cynical or less than supportive, I really may not have ever been an actor. And I think the role of the teacher and the mentor is extremely important in the development of anyone. So I fell in love with the theater. I never really thought like, oh, I'm going to be a TV actor or a film actor or something like that. That just seemed way too out of reach. And I was kind of weird looking and nerdy and gawky. So I did plays and experimental theater and whatnot. And after doing a lot of plays in undergrad, I decided that I would audition professionally. I was like 19 years old. And I went around Seattle with a headshot and resume auditioning in local theaters. And I was terrible. And of course, I didn't even come close to getting cast. And I realized, oh, I need some very serious training. So that's when I auditioned for graduate schools and training programs. And I got into the graduate acting program at NYU, which was run by this amazing woman who's now deceased, named Zelda Fitchandler. She's like the grande dame of American theater. She started the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. as one of the first, they called regional theaters in the United States. And it was amazing. It was an amazing program. It was, and a lot of English people understand this because there's so many incredible programs there. And in fact, you created the whole idea of a drama study program was really created in the British Isles. So, 16 hours a day doing speech and voice and tongue stretches and Shakespearean sonnets and clowning and movement and stage combat and you name it. And it really prepared me well. And I really think that I wouldn't have had the success as Dwight and other roles that I've played without that training, because when you get theater training, you learn how to use your body, you learn kind of how to create characters that are beyond yourself. It's all about transformation. So it's all taking, like, here's the raw tools and materials of Rainn Wilson. How do I transform those into playing Demetrius in A Midsummer Night's Dream, or Speed the Clown in Two Gentlemen of Verona, or Dwight Schrute in The American Office? How do you take those raw goods and make them come out in interesting ways? And the physicality of the theater, I think, helps actors. And I think that actors that don't get that training can kind of be kind of dead from the face down, and a little less interesting, and maybe have a little less longevity. So there's way more I could say about it, but I just love being a storyteller and thinking of myself as an actor, as a storyteller. You know, if you go way back, you can look at actor as like being a shaman, you know, part priest, part clown, part stand-up comic, part myth maker and storyteller. And in the best case scenarios, I think, without trying to sound too pompous, that a great actor, I'm not saying I'm a great one, but a great actor can be kind of a shaman for his day.
So setting up life as a theatre student in New York wasn't always easy, and you took on various jobs, including driving a van to pay your bills. Could you tell us a bit more about these challenges that you faced in your early days and the life lessons you've kind of learned from them?
Well, I love all the research you've done. I'm very impressed, Mahi. The usually you do a podcast, you're like, so what do you got going on these days? How did you get
We'll
here?
get to that in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, what lessons did I learn? I don't really know how to answer that question, other than this sounds kind of cliche, but I went through a lot of tests and difficulties. I had to make my own way. I didn't have financial support. I didn't have a trust fund. Of course, in the United States, you have to pay, you know, hand over a fist for your education and giant student loans. So I just had to work all along. I started working when I was about 14 years old in Washington State. I would pick raspberries over the summer in essentially child labor camps, where they disguised it. And you know, I was washing dishes when I was 16, and I was a busboy when I was 17, 18. I was waiting tables 19 or 20, and catering, and like I said, driving a moving van. So it was awful, but when I look back on it, it helped give me the fire to be a professional actor, because it's so easy to quit acting. There's so much rejection and so much difficulty as you go. And for me, it was, I didn't want to do those horrible, shitty jobs, and they sucked, and I had to do them in order to pay the rent. So I would do anything to act. So I would do anything. It's like, give me a job, give me a paycheck to act, and I will do that thing. So it lit a fire under my ass and allowed me to move forward and, you know, pursue my dream with a kind of a hunger where, because my wife and I talk about this, you know, we have a 15-year-old son. And, you know, I made some money from doing a TV show. And, you know, do we give him a trust fund? Do we give him, at the end of the day, an apartment to live in? Do we give him a stipend? You know, and it's an interesting conversation. And I think maybe the students at Oxford are far too young to even be thinking about these things. But the larger question that it touches on is, are you really doing your child a service by giving them a rent-free apartment or a stipend or a trust fund or something like that? Because you can de-incentivize them to such an extent that they lack that hunger to pursue their dream. So as I was driving this crappy moving van through New York City, and it was 100 degrees and sweat was pouring off of me, and I was moving people's futons and lamps and boxes full of books up 4 flights of stairs on the Lower East Side, I was just like, man, I do not want to do this. I really don't want to do this. I want to be acting. So how the hell do I get more acting work? And it helped me move forward. And I'm actually really grateful for the fact that I had to do those horrible jobs. I hate to say it, it's that old, like, as the old English would say, like, it's character building. Chummy, governor, something like that.
Brilliant. So you spent the first few years of your life working entirely in theatre, and then after that, you slowly started transitioning to on-screen work. Was this a conscious decision at all? And at what point did you make this decision?
No, I I wanted to do TV right away. So you mentioned the acting company. So there's this great company that was founded by John Houseman, who worked with Orson Welles. And it was to give young actors just out of theater school an experience of doing professional plays as a professional. And it's a bus and truck Shakespeare. So I did 2.5 years of bus and truck Shakespeare tours. When I was doing Midsummer Night's Dream, the great American actor Jeffrey Wright was, he's on Westworld one now. He's been in 1,000 things. You'd recognize him in a heartbeat if you Google him. He was playing Puck, and I was Demetrius in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And we finished our tour. It was a 6-month tour. We got back to the offices to collect our mail. I looked at my bank statement. I opened it up, and it had like $3,000. And I had saved $3,000. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And it was 1992. So that was a lot more money back then. And I was like, oh, this is cool, but wow, okay, this is gonna last, this is gonna last 3 or 4 months, and I'm gonna have to find another job. And then Jeffrey Wright opened, he got a actor's residual, and he got $3,000 for doing 1 day on a Harrison Ford movie. And he was like, yo, I can't believe it. Oh, this is awesome. Oh man, this saved my ass. And in my head, I kind of shook my head, and inside I was like, okay, I'm really in the wrong line of work here. If I want to ever save any money, if I want to have a house, car, anything, pay off my student loans, I have to get some TV and film work. I'm just going to have to do it. So it was a very difficult, long slog before I did any. It's 9 years in New York City, where I never made more than $20,000 in a year being a theater actor. And I was working a lot. And I just trying to get better representation. And you could tell how bad my representation was. I mean, having an agent or manager or whatever, because I could never even get an audition for Law and Order. Like every New York actor had been in Law and Order, playing one of the guys like, oh yeah, I used to see him coming around here, but he doesn't come around here no more. Whatever the little scene is. I couldn't even get an audition for Law and Order. 9 years in New York, I couldn't do it. So I just kept, again, slogging away, trying to get a better agent, trying to get on TV and film. And I realized like my way in was through comedy. I was having much more success I never did like sitcoms, but a little more comedic roles. And oddly enough, when I moved to Los Angeles with a theater group that I had started in '99, the city of LA and the people of LA were much more welcoming to me as an artist and as an actor than they ever were in New York. And there were a lot more open doors, and I started working in TV and film almost immediately.
So your big on-screen break, of course, came in 2005 when you were cast as Dwight Schrute in The Office, for which you have been nominated for 3 consecutive Emmys. Could you tell us a bit about how this role came to you and what your expectations were from it when you first took it?
Sure. So from '99 when I moved to LA to 2004 when I was cast in The Office, it was, a long 3-4 years of just slogging around, trying to get commercials, trying to get little guest spots on TV shows. I played a demon alchemist on the show Charmed about those teenage witches. I was like Guy in Supermarket on CSI. A lot of those kind of roles. And it was tough going. It was tough going. And really the door that opened for me that got me The Office was this show called 6 Feet Under, which people have kind of forgotten about these days, but it was really I think an important show and a great show for its time. It's right when HBO was taking off. It was on at the same time as The Sopranos and The Wire. I played this character, this creepy mortician named Arthur, who had an affair with the mom. And it opened a lot of doors for me. And I remember I had been cast in this Janeane Garofalo pilot called Slice of Life. And Isn't that a terrible name? And I had seen The English Office. So my friend Sam, who's a TV writer, he was actually a writer on Breaking Bad. He was like, "Oh my God, you've got to see this show." I've taped it off of BBC America or public television or something. Like he literally like taped it on VHS when the first airings came to the United States. He's like, "This show is amazing. It's going to change your life." Little did he know. So I watched those first 3, 4, 5 episodes with Ricky Gervais, and we were just blown away. It was so funny, so insightful, so much heart, and so strange. And I was like, "Oh my God, that's fantastic." And as I was going to the table read of Slice of Life with Janeane Garofalo, and actually Bob Odenkirk was in that, and Mark Maron, we were all in that show. I ran into this television executive that I knew walking over there, and he's like, "Hey, we just secured the rights to the US version of The Office. We're so psyched." And I was like, inside, I was like, "Oh." And outside, I was like, "Oh, that's great. Oh, that's going to be good. It's so good. That's going to be so good." Inside, I was like, "Oh, I want to do that. That sounds so cool." And we went and did the table read, and this was a pretty notorious table read because we had our plane tickets. They had the sets built in Vancouver where we were going to be shooting. It was really a formality. The table read went so poorly that they pulled the plug on it. They just were like, "No, we're not going to shoot this show." And all of a sudden, and I still got paid, by the way. And a day later, they were like, "Don't go to Vancouver. Everyone has been let go. You're free." And then, I'm not kidding you, a week or two later, "We have an audition for you for the US version of The Office." So fate, as bummed out as I could have been, and as a lot of people were about the cancellation of that show, like it opens up doors. And I think that's a very valuable life lesson. Like you just never know. You never know when these terrible things happen for an ultimately far greater purpose. And thank God I didn't end up spending years or even a year or half a year on a terrible Janeane Garofalo show. I mean, I love Janeane, but you know what I'm saying. So, yeah, and I auditioned for both Michael Scott and Dwight, and my Michael Scott audition was just god awful. I don't know if they've released it. I think the casting director kept threatening to release it because I just did a bad Ricky Gervais impersonation. I mean, down to his mannerisms. I mean, it was terrible. But Dwight, I knew when I read, I was like, "Oh, this is the part. Like, I know this part. This is me. I can do this. This is who I am. This is my relatives in, suburban, rural Washington state who are farmers and gun owners and muscle car drivers and heavy metal listeners and nerds all at the same time." So that's how it happened.
Which leads me very nicely to my next question, which actually is asking about your relationship with Dwight as a character and how you grew to understand him better after so many seasons of playing him.
Well, it's interesting. So I was very fortunate in the creation of Dwight that there was an amazing template for the character with Mackenzie Crook and Gareth. And I basically just stole the great stuff that Mackenzie did and then added a bunch more stuff to it. So thank you, Mackenzie. His performance is fantastic. It's superlative. It's spotless. I had never seen a character created who was such a weird nerd and such a kind of nascent fascist at the same time. And I loved those qualities, and I loved his ability to say the most preposterous things in the world with an utterly straight face and to completely believe them. There's many things I loved about his performance. So I loved creating the character of Dwight. When I met first with the writers in the writers' room, I brought a bunch of my family photos. I brought photo albums. So this is my uncle Billy with the sideburns and the muscle car. This is my uncle Doug, who was a sewer truck repairman, and here's my farmer ancestors from Wisconsin and Minnesota, and literally pictures of my grandparents out in the fields, and then pictures of me growing up playing Dungeons and Dragons and being really nerdy. And it gave them a lot of ideas. And I really think that the whole Dwight being a beet farmer really came from some of those early conversations. And Greg Daniels, the show's creator, his grandparents or great grandparents had been beet farmers in the old world in Poland, I believe. So he managed to fit that in. But but the interesting thing is, like, when you look at the show, and I haven't really seen it since it's aired. I've only seen maybe 5 or 10 episodes since the show aired. But I was watching some scenes from early, and it's amazing how close Dwight was early on. If you look at episodes 2 through 6, you look at basketball or healthcare or hot girl episodes early on, it's pretty similar to what Dwight was later on. I think my only failing in the role when I look back on it is in some of the later seasons, I was getting too comfortable in the character, and I was just kind of, I'm not phoning it in, but just kind of not continuing to mine how wonderfully awkward he is and how much he's trying to fit in. So he was too loose and casual in the later seasons at times. I still think we did some really great work in the later seasons. There's some bummer episodes, but there's some really, really funny stuff as well. So that's a very long-winded way of just saying that I loved helping develop the character, chose the haircut, the idea that he has a pager and a calculator wristwatch, the short-sleeved shirts, like a lot of these details we worked really hard on, had a lot of conversations about how he should be, how he is in his body, where he is in relation to Jim, and what his history has been. And I remember, and I need to find this, I wrote Greg Daniels early on about Dwight, and I said I just had some questions and I had some concerns, and he wrote me, like, I'm not kidding you, he wrote me an essay of an email back about Dwight and his background and how he viewed him. And he kept coming back to this idea of he's very clannish, like the Schrutes, like the idea that the Schrutes do things a certain way. And there's this pride in that. And that really helped me find the character as well.
So alongside being a huge presence on screen, you also directed 3 episodes of The Office. How did you find the filmmaking experience, and is it something you'd look to trying again?
Yes. A lot of us got to direct episodes as we went along. That happens a lot in television, and it's a great way to kind of whet your teeth, whet your appetite, whet your, what is it? What's the phrase? Cut your teeth, wet your toes, dip your toes.
Dip your toes.
I don't know what the analogy is. It's
I think that's
one
the
of those
one.
things. One of those things. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was, I got a lot out of it. I also got to direct when I was on Star Trek Discovery, a year or 2 ago. I got to direct a short Star Trek film from that. And there's there's a couple screenplays that I've written or co-written that I'm trying to get made right now. So I would like to do more work as a director. I'm not sure about doing a television directing because it takes so much time, and you don't get to really kind of pursue your vision as a television director, but I would like to pursue it more. I greatly enjoyed it. So yeah, it's an amazing, directing to me is like this incredibly insane exercise where I'm not kidding you, you're making about 100 different decisions every hour. So people are coming up and like, is this the pen the character should use? How is this cup? Do you think it should be orange or red that the character has? And you have to be like, orange. And yes, this pen is perfect. Or no, get me a black pen. Or you have to be making these countless like decisions. And they might seem superfluous, but they all add up to something because you're telling a story and you're creating a world and a tone, and you need to be very true to that world and that tone in all of these myriad decisions that you make.
So in your vast experiences in the industry, you've also had the chance to do some voice acting in films such as Monsters vs. Aliens, The Smurfs, and several of the latest DC Superman films. Could you tell us a bit more about this experience and the skills you've picked up from voice acting?
Yeah, voice acting is it's so much fun, and it's really one of the easiest jobs in the world. I mean, you can roll in kind of looking how I am now in my quarantine messy hair, and you just roll in, and they got some coffee and a microphone, and you just shoot the shit for a while, and then you do your thing. But I love it. I've always loved animation, and obviously, like so many of us, grew up watching it, and trying to bring those kind of theater skills of personal transformation and creating character, but you only have your voice to make that come alive, is a really unique challenge.
So beyond the TV and film industry, you are also the founder of the website and YouTube channel SoulPancake, which now has over 3.3 million subscribers on YouTube. And it featured, I believe, in the 2005 fastest growing private companies in America list. You describe SoulPancake as a company that makes stuff that matters. Could you tell us a bit more about what this project is?
Sure. So when I knew that I was going to be in the office for a while, I started talking to some friends of mine, and I said, there's an incredible opportunity here. Because when you're an actor, you just don't know where your income's going to come from. You don't know if you're going to get a paycheck week in, week out. And even if you get a TV job, you're not sure if it's going to be on for very long. But we knew that all of a sudden in season 2, halfway through season 2, we were kind of a hit. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm probably going to have paychecks for years. So we had long discussions about, and back at the time when we were having these discussions, 2008, 2009, the internet was a really just horrific place. It was just the worst of humanity was on the internet. It was just porn and Kardashian butts and credit card scores. It pretty much still is the same, but it was even worse. It was hard to find anything positive. We knew we wanted to make the world a better place. So what did that mean? So we started making SoulPancake as a website destination where people could sign up for almost like a social media site where there were message boards, there was news. It was for people interested in chewing on life's big questions. Because what I wanted to try and do early on was get young people talking about the big questions of life. To kind of open up their minds and their hearts in new ways, and to kind of make those conversations cool again, and not just conversations that you had in a philosophy class in college. So that went okay, but it wasn't doing great. But we did find that the video content that we were making was very successful and was very high quality, and people were responding to it. So we quote unquote pivoted from being a tech web destination site to a digital media company. And that was right when digital media was first starting up, where YouTube channels, branded content, short form digital stuff people would watch on their phones essentially, was just getting going. So we were one of the pioneers in that space, and we were certainly one of the pioneers in doing inspiring, feel-good content. And excuse me, we were very lucky because we had a couple of hit shows early on, including one called Kid President with this wonderful actor, African-American young actor playing a pretend president in the United States with a cardboard Oval Office, and in delivering kind of uplifting, inspiring speeches about making the world a better place. And that became a big hit. That kind of put us on the map, and we did a lot of branded content and work with brands and marketing of brands and whatnot. But essentially, the idea was, let's try and make a for-profit media company whose goal is to make the world a better place with uplifting, inspiring content that's also challenging. And now, like you said, our tagline is "We make stuff that matters." And it's been incredible. You know, as a company, we've really pioneered that space. We were around before Upworthy or A Plus or a lot of the other networks that were doing similar stuff. And we've had a lot of great shows, and we've had a lot of great impact on people. You know, people have been very moved by our content, and we get letters and emails all the time. And it's been a really important part of my life. And, you know, I really believe in that everyone needs to give back. I think that, you know, there's a lot more to be said on kind of the philosophy of SoulPancake, and I could go on at great length in a number of different arenas about it. But the main thing is that I believe that we have a twofold moral purpose in our lives. Our moral purpose, and when I say moral, I mean, I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about just basics of right and wrong that could belong to an atheist as well. But, and that is, we try and make ourselves better people. We try to improve, become more wise, more kind, more loving, more compassionate. And at the same time, we also try and make the world a better place. And I think for many decades, there was this kind of like mythology of, oh, as long as I'm not hurting anybody else, I'm fine. If I'm happy and not hurting anybody else, I'll be fine. And that kind of was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I don't know about England, but in the United States, that's pretty prevalent. And my feeling is that's just not going to cut it. You know, it just doesn't work that way anymore. There's 7 billion of us on the planet. 1 billion people are going to bed hungry. Now we've got this pandemic. Who knows what ravages that's going to engender. And we have to try like hell to improve the quality of life around us for others, to reduce suffering, to bring more social justice, awareness, kindness, connectivity, whatever that is. And we can all do that in different ways. You know, some people, it's going to be brash, in your face social justice work, fighting income inequality or racism. That's great. Some people, it's going to be a little bit more diplomatic, a little more kind of long-term view, maybe more spiritual work, emotional work, therapeutic work, service-oriented stuff. So it's kind of just a long diatribe that, you know, why did I found SoulPancake? Well, I did it to try and make the world a better place. We have billions of video views that have uplifted people and made them ugly cry, and you know, opened some people's eyes to some really difficult issues. And we all need to try and do that. I'm not saying like follow in my footsteps. I just believe that if everyone was trying to not only improve their own life, but also trying to improve the lives of others, whatever that meant, that we could actually make the world a better place. And I know that that sounds naive nowadays. When I was a kid, we would talk about world peace. You know, in the 1970s, people would talk about, oh, we need to achieve world peace. Now, if you bring up world peace, people are like, oh, please, you know, fatigue, like, you're so naive. It'll never happen, never happen. The political right and the political left are too polarized. There's too many arms. It's a fool's game. But I think, you know, world peace, you know, let there be peace in the world and let it begin with me. I understand that world peace is a stretch, is a reach, but we can have inner peace, and we can have peace in our household, and we can have peace between our neighbors, and we can build peace in our communities, and then peace in our cities, and then peace in our states, and it can blossom and bloom, and we have to keep trying.
All of this leads me very nicely to asking about the Baha'i faith, which you and your family are members of. Could you tell us a bit more about what this exactly is and the role it plays in your life?
Yeah, so what I'm talking about here is essentially teachings from the Baha'i faith. So the Baha'i faith is the most recent of all the world religions, and I grew up Baha'i. I left it for a long time, hardcore, when I was going to be an actor in New York City. And then I come back in the last 20 years or so. And the Baha'i faith is really about just what I was talking about. It's about here's spiritual prescriptions to help make yourself a better person. And in so doing, to give yourself greater happiness, contentment, joy. And part of how you do that is by serving others. The highest form of worship in the Baha'i faith is service to others. And Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, who's Persian from the mid-19th century Persia, he teaches that work in the spirit of service is worship in the eyes of God. So work in service to others is the same as worship. So you don't have to like pray. I mean, we do have prayers and meditation in the Baha'i faith, but it's not really about that. So this was a great inspiration to me in my life, and this idea that Baha'u'llah also said that all men have been created to carry forth an ever-advancing civilization. So what does that mean, an ever-advancing civilization? Well, the civilization of humanity on the planet, of a culturally diverse, beautiful garden of different flowers, living in, cherishing our diversity and living in harmony, that this can and has to be established. It'll either be established through terrible wars, or it'll be established through a lot of hard work, or maybe a little bit of both, but it needs to come to pass. So it's been a great guiding force in my life. And I think that Baha'is believe that there's one God, and God sends messengers, divine teachers, prophets, whatever you want to call them, throughout man's history to educate humanity spiritually. And that Baha'u'llah is the most recent of these teachers. So Baha'is are also followers of Jesus, and followers of Muhammad, and followers of the Buddha. And we're also followers of Baha'u'llah. And I believe that Baha'u'llah and his teachings have a great deal of spiritual guidance that can absolutely benefit humanity moving forward and into its inevitable spiritual maturity.
So to this end of serving others and serving humanity, you've worked in the charity sector for several years now, and are the co-founder of an arts and literature charity in Haiti. Could you tell us a bit more about the work you've done with this organization?
Sure. So this was all happening at around the same time I started getting interested in philanthropy. I joined the board of a foundation in the United States called the Mona Foundation that supports charities and nonprofits around the world, schools, educational initiatives. And I started, I told that story about my acting teacher, right? But I started realizing when I looked at my life that education gave me what I needed to be who I was. And I was so grateful. I was so privileged to get a great education, and so grateful for the education that I got. And then I wanted to work in education to allow the disadvantaged to get more education. And that's when my wife and I went to Haiti. We went in late 2009 to visit a bunch of schools in Haiti, and we were absolutely devastated by the poverty there, the difficulties there. And a month later was the earthquake, and 200,000 people died in the matter of 3 or 4 minutes. It was, devastation, in humanity's history, there's almost been not as much devastation. It was like a nuclear bomb. It was in a place, in one of the poorest places in the world. So we knew we needed to do something. And my wife and I went back a few months later, and we were teaching she's a fiction writer, my wife, and teacher, and I had taught some acting and stuff. So we were teaching the arts to these adolescent girls living in a tent camp, living in a muddy, 10,000 people living in tents on what used to, a dilapidated, what used to be a golf course. And we were really moved by the work and saw the power of the work. And so along with the woman, Dr. Catherine Adams, we decided to start an organization that would do arts education and literacy for disadvantaged rural Haitian girls, kind of the most disadvantaged population on the planet. I won't take up a lot of space right now talking about, but adolescent girls in Haiti are incredibly mistreated and neglected. And so we wanted to serve specifically that population. And it's been amazing. So we've been around for, 6 or 7 years now. It's called l'idée. That's a word in Haitian Creole that means both leader and idea. So French would be l'idée, and in Lida in Creole, that's what the girls wanted to name the organization. So we're in 13 locations serving 800 girls. We do a lot more than just arts and literacy. We have a full-time nurse on staff. We do health care and hygiene education. We do tutoring. We have a mobile computer lab. We have an amazing Haitian staff of 30 or 40 teachers. And now during the pandemic, we're doing a lot of work on the ground around COVID-19, around education, hand washing stations, at-home workbooks, mental health checkups. We created a toll-free number for them to call if they have any issues or questions or health-related concerns. So it's been a great honor and privilege to serve that. And essentially what I do is I whore myself out as Dwight to raise money for the poorest of the poor. So I go like sign Dwight headshots and bobbleheads and all this stuff, and then take that money and then I send it off to Haiti. So that's kind of how we keep the lights on. But anyone can look at our website, lidehaiti.org, if they want to help or donate.
Thank you so much for that, Rainn. I have one final question from the audience. This one is from Will at Worcester, and he asks, how would Dwight be handling the coronavirus crisis, and what would he think of the Trump administration's response?
I think that Dwight would view this, first of all, there's all these conspiracy theories flying around that Bill Gates invented that virus at a lab in Wuhan, China. And, it's absolutely nuts. And Dwight would love it. And he'd be at the bottom of every conspiracy theory. I think he'd view this as a great preparation for the inevitable zombie apocalypse. So there would be a lot of armaments. And I think he thinks the Trump administration is terrible, but not for the reason that most Americans think it's terrible. I think he'd think it's terrible because they're not draconian enough. They need to be more hardcore. They need to send in the shock troops. He would want the United States to be headed towards fascism a lot faster than it currently is.
Thank you so much, Rainn. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Nice talking to you. I wish I could be there in person, and all my love to the great people and students and town of Oxford.
Thank you very much.